A young woman vanishes from a crowded carnival in 1993. Her bracelet found abandoned at 4:17 a.m. For 25 years her fiancé plays the grieving victim. But beneath his tears lies a chilling secret. This is the story of how one detective refused to let silence win, and how DNA finally spoke the truth that destroyed a perfect lie. If you are fascinated by cases where justice refuses to die, subscribe now, because this channel uncovers the evidence that time cannot erase. This is the case of Sarah Beth Thornton. October 26, 1993. The Baldwin County Fair in Fairhope, Alabama was celebrating its final night. The air smelled of fried dough and diesel fuel from the generators. Carousel music mixed with teenage laughter. Children screamed on spinning rides while parents clutched paper tickets. It was the kind of evening that should have created memories, not mysteries. Sarah Beth Thornton was 19 years old that night. She had honey blonde hair that caught the carnival lights and a smile that her coworkers at Patterson Fabrics always remembered. She wore a denim jacket over a floral dress, and on her left wrist was a silver bracelet with 3 small charms, a heart, a star, and a tiny carousel horse her fiancé had given her the previous summer. Michael Collins was that fiancé. 22 years old, confident, the son of the man who owned Collins Hardware on Main Street. Everyone in Fairhope knew the Collins family. Respectable, established. The kind of people who sponsored Little League teams and attended every town council meeting. Michael and Sarah Beth had been engaged for 7 months. The wedding was planned for June 1994. That October night, they arrived at the fair at 6:45 p.m. Witnesses later told investigators they saw the couple sharing cotton candy near the tilt-a-whirl. They rode the Ferris wheel twice. At 8:30 p.m. Several people noticed them arguing near the game booths. Nothing violent, just tense whispers and Sarah Beth crossing her arms. One witness, a woman named Dorothy Hayes, said Sarah Beth looked like she had been crying, but Michael kept smiling, touching her shoulder, trying to calm her down. At 9 p.m., Michael told investigators he needed to help his father close the hardware store. He said Sarah Beth wanted to stay at the fair with friends. He kissed her goodbye near the carousel. That was his story. That was the last time he claimed that he ever saw her alive. At 9:45 p.m. Sarah Beth was seen alone, walking past the carousel. A carnival worker named Eddie Suarez remembered her, because she asked him for directions to the parking lot. He pointed west. She thanked him and walked away, her bracelet catching the colored lights. She never made it to her car. By 11:30 p.m. Sarah Beth's mother, Carol Thornton, called the Fairhope Police Department. Sarah Beth had promised to be home by 11. She always kept her promises. Carol had tried calling Michael Collins. He said he had not heard from her since he left the fair. His voice, Carol later recalled, sounded strange, nervous. At 4:17 a.m. on October 27, a sanitation worker named Jerome Williams found Sarah Beth's silver bracelet lying in the grass near the back fence of the fairgrounds. The clasp was broken. There were 2 strands of blonde hair caught in the chain. There was no sign of Sarah Beth Thornton. Chief Robert Hamilton launched a full-scale search at dawn. 50 volunteers combed the fairgrounds, the surrounding woods, the nearby roads. Search dogs picked up Sarah Beth's scent near the back fence, then lost it near the gravel road that led to the highway. It was as if she had simply vanished into the October darkness. Michael Collins stood beside Carol Thornton during the searches, his face pale, his hands shaking. He gave interview after interview to local reporters. He begged for Sarah Beth's safe return. He cried on camera. Everyone believed him. Everyone thought he was the devastated fiancé. But Detective Linda Chambers noticed something. Michael's shoes were freshly cleaned, spotless. Strange for someone who had supposedly spent the morning searching muddy fields. The first 48 hours of any missing persons case are critical. In Sarah Beth's case, those hours were consumed by a theory that seemed obvious. The carnival workers, transient, unknown, easy to blame. Chief Hamilton ordered background checks on every carnival employee. 43 workers were fingerprinted. Their travel records were examined. Their criminal histories pulled. Detective Chambers spent 72 hours interviewing ride operators, ticket sellers, food vendors. She found petty theft, unpaid child support, nothing that pointed to murder. Eddie Suarez, the man who gave Sarah Beth directions, became the primary suspect for 2 weeks. He had a prior arrest for assault in Mississippi. He was nervous during questioning, but his alibi held. Security footage from the fair showed him working the ring toss booth from 9:30 p.m. until midnight. He could not have been involved. The Carnival left Fairhope on October 30th. The investigation stalled. Then, on November 4th, a hunter named Carl Branson found Sarah Beth's body in a wooded area 7 miles from the fairgrounds. She was buried in a shallow grave covered with leaves and branches. She had been strangled. Her denim jacket was missing. Her floral dress was torn. The medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Voss, determined that Sarah Beth had died between 10 p.m. and midnight on October 26th. Cause of death was asphyxiation due to ligature strangulation. There were defensive wounds on her hands. She had fought her attacker. The crime scene revealed few clues. No murder weapon, no clear footprints. The soil had been disturbed by rain, but investigators collected hair samples from Sarah Beth's clothing. They found a single fiber, dark blue, synthetic, possibly from a jacket or tarp. They documented everything and sent evidence to the state lab. The investigation now focused on anyone who knew Sarah Beth. Her coworkers were interviewed. Her friends. Her ex-boyfriends. Everyone had alibis. Everyone passed polygraph tests. Michael Collins voluntarily took a polygraph. The examiner noted some irregular responses, but nothing definitive. Michael explained that he was traumatized. Grieving, he hired a lawyer not because he was guilty, he said, but because the police were harassing him. Detective Chambers wanted to push harder on Michael. She requested phone records. She wanted to search his car, his home. But Chief Hamilton hesitated. The Collins family had influence. The town was small. Without hard evidence, accusations against Michael could destroy careers. The case went cold. By 1994, the investigation had no active leads. The evidence sat in storage. Carol Thornton attended every town meeting, begging for answers. Michael Collins moved to Mobile, Alabama. He rarely returned to Fairhope. Years passed. The case file gathered dust. Sarah Beth Thornton became another name on a list of unsolved murders. Another victim whose killer walked free. But evidence does not forget, and some detectives refused to quit. From 1994 to 2017, Sarah Beth's case lived in a filing cabinet in the Fairhope Police Department basement. Occasionally, a new detective would review the file, hoping to find something missed. They never did. The case was a dead end, cold frozen. Carol Thornton never stopped fighting. Every year on October 26th, she held a vigil at the fairgrounds. She placed flowers near the carousel. She handed out flyers with Sarah Beth's picture. She gave interviews to local newspapers, reminding people that her daughter's killer was still out there. Michael Collins rarely appeared in public in Fairhope. He had married in 1997. He managed a construction supply company in Mobile. When reporters occasionally asked him about Sarah Beth, he said the same thing every time. He missed her every day. He wished he had answers. He hoped the police would finally solve the case. His voice always sounded sincere. In 2017, Detective Marcus Thompson was assigned to the cold case unit. He was 34 years old, methodical and stubborn. He had a rule. Every cold case deserves fresh eyes. He started reviewing files alphabetically. Sarah Beth Thornton was near the end of his list, but when he opened her file in August 2017, something caught his attention. The evidence logs mentioned VHS tapes. Security footage from the Baldwin County Fair. Detective Chambers had noted in her reports that the tapes showed nothing useful, but Thompson wanted to see them himself. He found the tapes in evidence storage. 3 VHS cassettes labeled dated, untouched for 24 years. He borrowed an old VCR from the department's storage room and watched every frame. Most of the footage was grainy and useless. But on tape 2 at the 8:42 p.m. timestamp, Thompson saw something. Michael Collins and Sarah Beth arguing near the game booths, then Michael walking away. Then, at 9:14 p.m., Michael reappearing near the back fence of the fairgrounds. Not at his father's hardware store. At the fair, he was carrying something dark, a jacket or a bag. Thompson froze the frame. The timestamp was clear. 9:14 p.m. Michael had lied. He did not leave the fair at 9 p.m. He was still there. Thompson requested the original evidence from Sarah Beth's case, the hair samples, the blue fiber. In 2017, DNA technology had advanced exponentially. Tests that were impossible in 1993 were now routine. The state lab reprocessed the hair samples found on Sarah Beth's bracelet. 2 hairs belonged to Sarah Beth. 1 hair contained rootstock with intact DNA. It was male. The profile was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database. No match. The killer was not in the system. Thompson ran the profile through familial DNA databases. This technique, still relatively new, could identify relatives of the DNA donor. In December 2017, a search returned a hit, a second cousin match. The family tree led directly to the Collins family of Fairhope, Alabama. The hair belonged to someone related to Michael Collins. Thompson obtained a warrant for Michael's DNA. In January 2018, Michael Collins was asked to provide a voluntary sample. He refused. A court order was issued. On January 19, 2018, Michael's DNA was collected. It was a perfect match to the hair found on Sarah Beth's bracelet. But there was more. The blue fiber found on Sarah Beth's dress was reanalyzed using microscopic comparison techniques. It matched fibers from a tarp found in Michael Collins' garage during the search warrant execution. The tarp had been in his possession since 1993. The evidence was overwhelming. But Thompson wanted to understand the full story. He began investigating Michael's life in 1993. He found something that explained everything. Michael Collins had been having an affair. Her name was Rebecca Hoffman. In 1993, she was 20 years old, a cashier at a grocery store in Fairhope. She and Michael had been secretly involved for 8 months. She knew about Sarah Beth. She knew about the engagement. She did not care. She wanted Michael for herself. Detective Thompson found Rebecca living in Pensacola, Florida. She had married, divorced, remarried. She had 2 children. When Thompson knocked on her door in February 2018, she knew why he was there. She broke down in tears before he even asked a question. Rebecca confessed that on October 26, 1993, she and Michael had planned to confront Sarah Beth together. Michael had discovered that Sarah Beth suspected the affair. She had found text messages, receipts, whispers from friends. Sarah Beth had told Michael that if he did not end things with Rebecca, she would tell his family, cancel the wedding, and expose him to everyone in Fairhope. Michael could not let that happen. The Collins family reputation meant everything. His father had groomed him to take over the hardware business. A scandal would destroy everything. So Michael and Rebecca made a plan. Michael argued with Sarah Beth at the fair that night. He pretended to leave for the hardware store, but he circled back. He told Sarah Beth he wanted to talk privately, away from the crowds. He led her to the back fence of the fairgrounds, near the gravel road. Rebecca was waiting there in her car. They tried to convince Sarah Beth to keep quiet. They offered her money, they begged. But Sarah Beth refused. She called Michael a liar. She said she would never protect someone who betrayed her. That was when Michael grabbed her. Rebecca later said she did not know Michael would go that far. But once he started, she did not stop him. She watched as Michael strangled Sarah Beth with a rope he had brought in a bag. She watched as Sarah Beth fought, clawed, gasped for air. She watched as Sarah Beth died. Michael wrapped Sarah Beth's body in the blue tarp from his truck. Rebecca followed him in her car to the wooded area 7 miles away. They buried Sarah Beth together. Michael kept Sarah Beth's denim jacket and burned it later. Rebecca cleaned the tarp and stored it in Michael's garage. They made a pact. Never confess. If anyone asked, they barely knew each other. For 25 years they kept that pact. But in February 2018, faced with DNA evidence, Rebecca crumbled. She gave a full confession. She agreed to testify against Michael in exchange for a reduced sentence. On March 9, 2018, Michael Collins was arrested at his office in Mobile. He denied everything at first. But when prosecutors showed him the DNA match, the VHS footage, Rebecca's confession, and the fiber evidence, his lawyer advised him to negotiate. Michael Collins confessed on April 2, 2018. He admitted to strangling Sarah Beth Thornton on October 26, 1993. He admitted that Rebecca Hoffman helped him bury the body. He showed no remorse. He said he did what he had to do to protect his future. The trial began in September 2018. Rebecca Hoffman testified for 3 days. She described every detail of that night. The jury watched her cry. They watched Michael sit emotionless at the defense table. On October 25, 2018, 25 years and 1 day after Sarah Beth disappeared, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Michael Collins was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rebecca Hoffman pleaded guilty to accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Carol Thornton sat in the courtroom and wept. She had waited a quarter-century for this moment. Justice had finally arrived. Detective Marcus Thompson stood outside the courthouse and said something that every cold case investigator believes. Evidence never lies. It waits, it endures. And if you refuse to give up, it will speak. Sarah Beth Thornton's voice was silenced in 1993, but her evidence shouted the truth in 2018. A strand of hair. A blue fiber. A detective who refused to quit. This is why cold cases matter. This is why we never stop searching. Because every victim deserves justice no matter how long it takes. If this case moved you, subscribe to Silent Evidence Reveal. Hit the notification bell. Share this story. Help us bring attention to the unsolved cases that still wait for answers. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Sometimes it is just justice preparing to roar. This was the story of Sarah Beth Thornton. Remember her name.